The gavel slams against the wooden bench. Guilty? Judge Carter declares, his voice echoing through the tense courtroom. The weight of his words feels like a death sentence, heavier than the crime itself. 17-year-old Malik Johnson stands frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the defendant's table, so tightly his knuckles turn white. His brown eyes scan the room, looking for a glimmer of hope, a sign that this is all a misunderstanding. But there is none. Only the silent judgment of strangers who have already decided his fate before the trial even began. Judge Carter continues, his tone emotionless. Malik Johnson, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Even the prosecutor, a seasoned attorney who expected a conviction, shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Malik's mother lets out a broken sob, covering her mouth with trembling hands. His court-appointed public defender shakes his head in disbelief. The courtroom feels like a tomb, suffocating, as if all the air has been sucked out. 10 years. For a first-time offense. For shoplifting a hoodie worth $40. Malik's breath quickens, his pulse pounding in his ears. This can't be real. White kids get community service for worse. But for him, the system had already decided he was guilty before he even stepped into the courtroom. He was another statistic, another black boy they wanted off the streets. Judge Carter leans back, satisfied. To him, this is just another case, another punk who needed to be taught a lesson. Another moment to flex his authority. Court is adjourned, he says with a dismissive wave, slamming the gavel once more. The bailiff steps forward, ready to escort Malik away. But before he moves, something shifts. A man in the back of the courtroom rises, adjusting his tie. His presence commands attention, though no one recognizes him. Yet, Your Honor, the man speaks, his voice calm yet firm. I request an immediate halt to this sentencing. Judge Carter scoffs, barely looking up. And you are. The man walks forward with measured steps, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. His tailored suit is pristine, his posture confident. I am Malik Johnson's legal counsel, he states, and I have just obtained new evidence that proves his innocence. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Judge Carter's expression darkens. That is impossible. This boy was given a public defender. The trial has concluded. The man smirks. With all due respect, Your Honor, I am not just any lawyer. I am Federal Attorney David Langston, and I have been personally overseeing this case from behind the scenes. He hands a folder to the clerk, who rushes it to the judge. Judge Carter's eyes narrow as he flips through the documents. The color drains from his face. What is this? He mutters, reading faster now. Surveillance footage. Langston answers smoothly. Footage that your court conveniently omitted from evidence. It shows Malik Johnson walking out of the store empty-handed. It also shows another individual, a white teenager, stuffing the stolen hoodie into his backpack. The room is silent. A thick, unbearable silence. Judge Carter swallows, his arrogance faltering. This is highly irregular, he stammers. Why was this not brought forward during trial? Langston folds his arms. You tell me, Your Honor, because as it stands, you were about to sentence an innocent young man to a decade in prison for a crime he did not commit. The judge's jaw clenches. His mind races. This is bad. Very bad. His reputation is at stake, his career, his future. Malik's mother grips the edge of the bench, staring at the judge with tears streaming down her face. The weight of injustice hangs in the air, suffocating everyone in the room. I will need time to review this, Judge Carter finally says, his voice shaky. Langston steps closer. You don't have time, he says coolly. Malik Johnson is to be released immediately. And I suggest you start preparing a statement, because this—" He gestures to the folder in the judge's hands. "This is going to the press." The judge's fingers twitch. Sweat beads on his forehead. He had underestimated the boy standing before him. Underestimated the power behind him. Malik, who had been silent all this time, finally speaks. His voice is steady, stronger than anyone expected. "You were so quick to throw me away," he says, locking eyes with the judge. "But you never even looked at the facts." Judge Carter says nothing, because for the first time in his long career he is afraid. Afraid of the consequences. Afraid of the truth. And afraid that this is just the beginning. Judge Crawford sat frozen, his gavel still clutched in his trembling hand. The courtroom that had been his domain for decades no longer felt like his own. The murmurs of disbelief and hushed gasps of the crowd filled the silence. All eyes locked on the young man standing before him. Elijah Grant, the very same teenager he had just sentenced to 5 years in prison. Only now, he wasn't just another black teen from the streets. He was the son of Supreme Court Justice William Grant. Elijah's calm gaze never wavered, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unraveling around him. His mother, Vanessa Grant, the esteemed civil rights attorney, stood from the front row, her face etched with a mixture of fury and cold determination. "How dare you?" she hissed, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she stepped forward. "You violated due process. You ignored evidence. You passed a sentence before the defense could even speak." Judge Crawford's throat was dry. I wasn't aware. That's the problem." Vanessa cut him off sharply. "You didn't care to be aware." The realization dawned upon him like a slow-moving storm. This wasn't just a grave mistake. This was career suicide. The Grants were legal royalty. William Grant had served on the Supreme Court for over a decade, and Vanessa Grant was known for tearing apart corrupt officials in court. And now their son, whom he had treated like a nameless statistic, stood before him, no longer a victim but the storm that was about to unravel everything he had built. The reporters in the gallery were already typing furiously, cameras flashing. This would be national news within the hour. A judge unfairly sentencing the son of a Supreme Court justice? The implications were damning. Before Crawford could respond, the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, and in walked a tall, imposing figure dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. The room fell silent as William Grant himself entered, his piercing eyes sweeping over the courtroom like a predator assessing its prey. Judge Crawford's heart pounded in his chest. "Justice Grant," he stammered, rising to his feet. Grant ignored him, his gaze settling on his son. Elijah turned to face his father, his expression unreadable. A moment passed between them, silent but charged. Then Justice Grant looked at Judge Crawford, his voice steady but carrying the weight of finality. "I want the full transcript of this hearing. Every word, every motion denied, every objection ignored." The court stenographer nodded, already preparing copies. "And I want this conviction overturned," Vanessa added, her voice sharp. "Immediately." Judge Crawford was sweating. I don't have the authority to." "You had the authority to pass a biased sentence without cause," William Grant said coldly. "You have the authority to correct it." The weight of his mistake pressed against his chest. This wasn't just about Elijah anymore. If the Grants pursued legal action, Crawford's entire career would be dismantled. His history would be dug through, every biased ruling exposed. His legacy gone. He swallowed hard. "I will vacate the sentence." Elijah didn't flinch, didn't gloat. He simply nodded, as if he had expected this all along. "Good," he said, his voice calm. "Now, let's talk about accountability." Crawford stiffened. Accountability. Elijah stepped forward, his presence commanding. No longer the quiet teenager on trial, but something much more formidable. "How many others like me have you done this to?" he asked. "How many black boys have you sentenced without a second thought, without looking at the facts?" The question hung in the air like a noose tightening around Crawford's neck. "You think this ends with me?" Elijah continued. "You think I'm the only one who's going to walk free today?" Judge Crawford opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The walls were closing in, and for the first time in his career, he felt powerless. Justice Grant turned to the crowd. "Every defendant that has ever stood before this man deserves a second look at their case." Reporters scrambled to take notes. Vanessa's lips curled into a cold smile. "I'll make sure of it." Judge Crawford felt his knees weaken. This wasn't just a mistake. This was the beginning of the end. And Elijah Grant wasn't finished yet. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Judge Whitaker stared at Malik, his face pale. His gavel trembled in his grip. He had made a grave mistake, and the weight of his prejudice was now crashing down on him. The murmurs among the spectators grew louder, their eyes darting between Malik and the now exposed corrupt DA, Robert Langston. Malik adjusted his suit and stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. "Your Honor, the evidence against Tyrell was fabricated. The real criminals have been walking free, protected by the very system that was supposed to deliver justice. But that ends today." The doors of the courtroom burst open, and several federal agents entered, their badges flashing under the fluorescent lights. "We have an arrest warrant for Robert Langston," one of them announced. Langston shot up from his seat, panic written all over his face. He turned to run, but two agents quickly restrained him, forcing him into handcuffs. Judge Whitaker gulped. I was only following the prosecution's argument. I had no idea." "You had every idea," Malik cut in, his voice sharp. "You dismissed evidence, rushed a trial, and ignored the pleas of an innocent young man. The system failed Tyrell because of people like you." Whitaker's hands trembled as he gripped the bench. His reputation was now on the line. "What happens now?" he muttered. Malik stepped closer, his presence commanding. "Now, Tyrell's conviction is overturned. And as for you, Your Honor, the Judicial Review Board will be investigating your rulings. Your days of blindly sentencing young black men without due diligence are over." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their cameras flashing as Langston was led out of the room, his face twisted in anger and humiliation. Tyrell sat motionless, struggling to process everything. His mother, tears streaming down her face, pulled him into a tight embrace. "You're free, baby," she whispered. "You're free." Malik turned to Tyrell, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Justice isn't just about proving innocence. It's about dismantling the system that makes it easy to label young black men as criminals. You never should have been here in the first place." Tyrell wiped his eyes, his voice shaky. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Malik offered a small smile. "Live your life. Be the man you were meant to be. That's how you repay me." As the spectators slowly emptied the courtroom, Judge Whitaker remained frozen, staring at his hands. The weight of his decisions had finally caught up to him. For the first time in his career, he felt powerless. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Malik, eager for a statement. "Mr. Carter, what's next? Will you be pursuing further legal action?" Malik paused, looking up at the sky for a moment before answering. "This isn't just about one case. It's about every young man who never got a second chance. This is just the beginning." As he walked down the courthouse steps, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed across his screen. "You've made powerful enemies today. Be careful." Malik exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over. He slid his phone into his pocket and disappeared into the crowd, already preparing for the next fight. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful and thought-provoking content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. Stay tuned for the next gripping tale.